In the year 2000, two men flew from California to Dallas to meet with the CEO of Blockbuster Video. They were asking for $50 million. Their company had 500,000 subscribers, was losing money, and had a business model that involved mailing DVDs in red envelopes. The Blockbuster CEO, John Antioco, sat through their pitch, and then, here is the part that gets me every time, he apparently laughed at them, walked them out, not interested. Those two men were Reed Hastings and Mark Randolph, the co-founders of a little company called Netflix. Blockbuster had 9,000 stores, 60 million customers, and $6 billion in annual revenue. 16 years later, Blockbuster was gone. Netflix was worth $150 billion. This is not just a story about one bad decision. It is the story of how a company that had everything convinced itself it had nothing to worry about. To understand the Blockbuster collapse, you have to understand how dominant the company actually was at its peak. Blockbuster was founded in 1985 in Dallas, Texas by a man named David Cook, who had made his money selling software to the oil industry. Cook saw that video rental stores were mostly small, disorganized operations with bad inventory systems, and walked out frequently because popular titles were always rented out. He built Blockbuster differently from day one. Computerized inventory, large store footprints, and a database that tracked every title in every location. Blockbuster could tell you in real time what was available and where. For 1985, that was genuinely advanced technology. The stores were bright, clean, and family-friendly. Honestly, walking into a Blockbuster on a Friday night felt like an event. That was very deliberate. By the early 1990s, Blockbuster had expanded aggressively across America and internationally. Huizenga, a serial entrepreneur who had previously built waste management and AutoNation into major companies, acquired Blockbuster in 1987 and drove its expansion with extraordinary speed. At its peak, Blockbuster was opening a new store somewhere in the world every 17 hours. The company went public in 1989, and its growth made it one of the most successful retail stories of the decade. By 1994, Huizenga sold Blockbuster to Viacom for $8.4 billion, which felt like an enormous validation of the business at the time. What nobody fully appreciated yet was that the business model had a fundamental and embarrassing flaw hiding inside its revenue structure, and Blockbuster's best customers knew exactly what it was. If you are the kind of person who learns more from watching companies fail than from watching them succeed, subscribe to SnapOldBusiness. We cover the real stories behind the world's biggest companies, the decisions that built them, and the decisions that destroyed them. Subscribe now and let us get to the thing that was killing Blockbuster from the inside long before Netflix showed up. Here is something most people do not know. In its final profitable years, Blockbuster was generating roughly $800 million annually in late fees. Not rental revenue, late fees. That was close to 16% of total revenue, coming entirely from charging customers extra money for keeping videos too long. The late fee was not incidental to the business model, it was load. Blockbuster needed those late fees to survive, and customers absolutely despised them. Reed Hastings himself has said publicly that the founding idea for Netflix came partly from returning a late copy of the film Apollo 13 to Blockbuster and paying a $40 late fee. That frustration was universal. Millions of people had that same experience. It was the open wound in Blockbuster's relationship with its own customers, and it was just sitting there waiting for someone to exploit it. Netflix launched in 1997 as a straightforward DVD by mail service. You ordered movies on their website, they mailed them to you. You mailed them back whenever you were done. No late fees. The model was simple but had a problem. The delay between ordering and receiving meant you needed to plan your viewing in advance, which was not how people actually watched movies. Netflix struggled for the first couple of years. Then in 1999 they introduced the subscription model, a flat monthly fee for unlimited rentals with no due dates and no late charges. This was the thing that changed everything. Customers suddenly had a completely different relationship with movie rental. No more rushing back to avoid a fee. No more guilt about keeping something an extra day. You paid your $15 a month and that was that. Clean and simple. The 2000 meeting in Dallas where Netflix offered to sell itself to Blockbuster for $50 million is one of the most discussed moments in business history, and it is worth understanding what was actually happening in that room. Netflix was genuinely struggling at the time. The dot-com bubble had burst. Internet companies were dying everywhere. Netflix was burning through cash and was not close to profitable. Selling to Blockbuster would have been a reasonable exit for the founders and investors. Antioco's decision to pass was not as obviously wrong in 2000 as it looks in retrospect. Here is what was wrong though. Antioco did not take the threat seriously. He did not study the model, did not assign a team to track what Netflix was doing, did not consider what would happen if the internet got faster and DVDs gave way to streaming. He looked at Netflix's small subscriber count and dismissed it. That single failure of imagination was the beginning of the end. For most of the early 2000s, Blockbuster did nothing meaningful about Netflix. The company was distracted by a much more immediate problem. Viacom, which had bought Blockbuster in 1994, wanted out. Blockbuster was spun off as an independent public company in 2004. This was done badly, saddling Blockbuster with almost $1 billion in debt and extremely limited financial flexibility. By the time Blockbuster fully understood the threat Netflix represented, it had neither the cash nor the strategic freedom to respond effectively. To be fair, Blockbuster did eventually try. In 2004, John Antioco brought in a new executive named Jim Keyes and launched a competing service called Blockbuster Online. The service was actually pretty good. It had all the same features as Netflix plus the option to return movies to physical stores. At one point, analysts believed Blockbuster Online was growing fast enough to genuinely threaten Netflix. In 2005, Blockbuster made its most aggressive competitive move. Antioco eliminated late fees entirely, eating a $400 million annual revenue hit in one decision to match Netflix's core value proposition. And it worked, at least commercially. Customers responded. Surveys showed satisfaction scores jumping immediately. The move cost Blockbuster dearly in the short term but was strategically sound because Blockbuster was finally competing on the thing that actually mattered to customers. Here is the brutal twist though. The very next year, Blockbuster's board fired Antioco over a pay dispute and replaced him with Jim Keyes, a former 7-Eleven executive. Keyes immediately reversed the no late fire policy because the company needed the cash. Then he made a statement that has become legendary in business school case studies. He said he had seen no evidence that Netflix was a threat to Blockbuster. That was 2008. Netflix had 10 million subscribers. It was all downhill from there. The speed of Blockbuster's collapse after 2008 is remarkable even knowing the full story. The company had 9,000 stores, which had been its greatest asset, but were now its heaviest anchor. Each store had a long-term lease, staff, inventory, and utilities. These costs did not go away as customers left. Every customer who switched to Netflix was one less person paying rent on Blockbuster's enormous physical footprint. By 2009, Blockbuster was missing debt payments. By 2010, it filed for bankruptcy. The company that had been worth $8.4 billion in 1994 went through Chapter 11. With $500 million in debt and virtually no viable future, Dish Network acquired the brand for just over $300 million in 2011, mostly to use the Blockbuster name for its own streaming attempts. Those also failed. Today there is exactly one Blockbuster store still operating in the world. It is in Bend, Oregon. Netflix's story from 2007 onwards is the other side of this equation, and it is just as dramatic. In 2007, Netflix began offering streaming alongside its DVD by mail service. The streaming library was initially small and not very impressive, but the idea, watching movies instantly without waiting for a disc in the mail, was obviously where everything was going. Reed Hastings made a decision at this point that is easy to underappreciate. He decided to invest in streaming while the DVD business was still extremely profitable, essentially cannibalizing his own most reliable revenue source before someone else did it for him. That willingness to destroy what was working in favor of what would work next is maybe the single most important decision in Netflix's history. Most companies cannot bring themselves to do that. Netflix did it anyway. The strategic shift Netflix made between 2010 and 2013 is one of the most studied transformations in modern business. In 2011, the company made a catastrophic-looking mistake when it announced it would split the DVD and streaming services into two separate companies. With the streaming service keeping the Netflix name and the DVD service being renamed Qwikster, the customers hated it. 800,000 subscribers cancelled within a month. The stock price dropped nearly 80% in 3 months. Hastings apologized publicly and reversed the decision. On the surface, it looked like a disaster. What was actually happening underneath was that Netflix was forcing itself to separate two businesses that had very different futures, and when the market reaction told it the timing was wrong, it was flexible enough to pull back. The company came out of that crisis much clearer about its streaming-first identity than before it went in. By 2013, Netflix made another move that permanently separated it from every competitor. It started making its own content. House of Cards was the first major Netflix original series. The decision to commission it was driven entirely by data. Netflix knew from its viewing records that its subscribers liked David Fincher's films, liked Kevin Spacey, and liked the original British House of Cards series, so it commissioned an American remake with all three and committed to 2 full seasons before a single episode had been seen. No traditional television network would have done that. Netflix could because it was using viewer data to make creative decisions in a way the television industry had never done before. House of Cards was a hit. Then came Orange is the New Black. Then The Crown, Stranger Things, Squid Game. Netflix had invented a new way to make and distribute entertainment. It is worth spending a moment on the human dimension of this story, because there is a person at the center of the Blockbuster collapse who is often reduced to a punchline. John Antioco ran Blockbuster from 1997 to 2007. He was, by most accounts, a capable retail executive. He understood the late fee problem. He launched Blockbuster Online. He eliminated late fees. He made the right strategic calls at almost every turn. What destroyed him was a board that was more focused on short-term cash flow than long-term survival, a debt structure that eliminated his room to maneuver, and a successor who reversed his best decisions within months of taking over. The Blockbuster failure is not a simple story of stupidity. It is a story about how structural constraints, debt, physical leases, board dynamics can make a company unable to do what it knows it needs to do. That is honestly a much scarier lesson than just calling one CEO dumb. The physical store versus digital delivery contrast is the most visible dimension of the Blockbuster Netflix story, but it masks something more fundamental. Blockbuster and Netflix had different relationships with their own data. Blockbuster collected some data, but its primary decision-making was based on store manager instinct, regional purchasing patterns, and Hollywood studio relationships. Netflix, from its earliest days, was obsessively data-driven. It tracked what every subscriber watched, when they paused, what they skipped, what they watched twice, what they abandoned. This data made Netflix's recommendations better than any human video store clerk could ever be. It made content investment decisions more reliable. It reduced waste. The competitive advantage that data gave Netflix was not something Blockbuster could have replicated just by launching a website. The organizational cultures were too different. And look, that gap only widens with time. The Blockbuster Netflix story has been repeated in industry after industry, which is what makes it genuinely worth studying rather than just a fun piece of tech history trivia. Kodak in digital photography, Nokia and the smartphone, Borders and ebooks, taxis and Uber, traditional television and streaming. In each case, the incumbent had resources, brand recognition, and customer relationships that the challenger lacked. In each case, the incumbent's existing business model created financial and structural incentives to ignore or underinvest in the technology that would eventually replace it. Clayton Christensen called this the innovator's dilemma. The better you are at serving your current customers, the harder it is to invest in the technology that will make your current offering irrelevant. Blockbuster was very good at being Blockbuster. That was the problem. There is one final wrinkle to the Blockbuster Netflix story that most people do not know about. In 2007, the year Netflix launched streaming, Blockbuster's online division was actually outgrowing Netflix. Blockbuster Total Access, the service that let customers return online rentals to physical stores, was genuinely superior to Netflix's offering at that point. Jim Keyes, the new CEO, looked at the cost of running both the physical stores and the online service simultaneously and decided it was not sustainable. So he gutted the online operation, fired the team that built it, and redirected investment back into the physical stores. Netflix had been worried enough about Blockbuster Total Access that Hastings later said it was the biggest competitive threat Netflix ever faced. Keyes solved that problem for him by dismantling it himself. Sometimes the competition doesn't beat you. You beat yourself. 3 lessons from the Blockbuster Netflix story that apply to any business in any industry. First, your most profitable revenue stream may be your biggest strategic vulnerability. Blockbuster's late fees were generating $800 million a year. That made them nearly impossible to eliminate even when everyone knew they were destroying customer relationships. The thing that makes you money today can be the exact thing preventing you from competing tomorrow. Second, being structurally unable to change is as dangerous as being unwilling to change. Antioco knew what needed to happen. The debt and the board stopped him. When you evaluate a company's strategic options, you have to look at its balance sheet and governance structure, not just its products and market position. Third, the competitor that is about to change your industry rarely looks like a threat at first. Netflix in 2000 was a money-losing DVD by mail company with 500,000 subscribers. It looked nothing like the competitor that would destroy Blockbuster. The threat that kills you is almost never the one that looks scary. It is the one that looks small and weird and completely The last Blockbuster store in Bend, Oregon has become something genuinely unexpected. It is a tourist attraction. People drive hours to visit it, take photos outside, rent a movie the old way, and spend time in a place that feels like a portal to a different version of the 1990s. The store's owner, a woman named Sandy Harding, has been running it since long before anyone suspected it would be the last one standing. She has turned it into a cultural artifact. There is a Blockbuster Airbnb attached to it, where you can sleep inside a Blockbuster store. The shop sells Blockbuster merchandise. Documentaries have been made about it. It is, quite unexpectedly, thriving. And there is something weirdly poetic about that. The company that refused to adapt is gone, but the thing people actually loved about it, the ritual of choosing a movie for Friday night, the physical act of browsing, the anticipation, that part apparently still has value, even in a streaming world. 2 men flew to Dallas in 2000 with a $50 million asking price and left empty-handed. One of them, Hastings, went back to California and spent the next decade building the company that would make the man who laughed at him famous for exactly the wrong reasons. Netflix is now worth more than $200 billion. Blockbuster is one store in Oregon. The $50 million that John Antioco passed on would have been the greatest investment in media history. Instead, it became the most expensive laugh in business history. Subscribe if this was worth your time. See you in the next one.